Hello, dear English learners, and welcome back to the Best English Podcast. I'm your host, Sophia, and I'm so happy to have you with me today. You know, I talk to so many of you every day through your messages, emails, and comments, and there's one topic that comes up again and again. It's a feeling that I know is all too common and deeply frustrating for so many of you. I'm talking about that feeling when you can easily understand everything you read or hear in English, whether it's a podcast like this, a movie, or a conversation between two native speakers. But when it's your turn to speak, the words just disappear. It's like a mental block, a freezing up that happens just as you open your mouth. You know the vocabulary, you understand the grammar, but the words just won't come out the way you want them to. If you've ever felt this way, please take a deep breath and let go of that frustration for a moment. You are absolutely not alone. In fact, this is one of the most significant and universal challenges that English learners face, especially at the B1 level where your foundational knowledge is already solid. You've put in the hard work. You've spent countless hours studying, listening, and reading, and that is a huge, huge achievement. It means you've successfully built a strong house. Now, the next step isn't about building a new one, it's about learning how to live in it, how to move around in it, and how to open the door to let others in. That's what speaking is all about. It's the active, dynamic use of all that knowledge you've been building. Today, we're going to start a deep dive into this topic. We're not just going to talk about a few tips. We're going to explore the root causes of this challenge and, together, we'll build a comprehensive plan to overcome it. We'll start with a story that I think many of you will find very relatable. A story about a friend of mine who went through this exact journey. Then we'll begin to unravel the reasons why your understanding skills are so far ahead of your speaking skills. We'll integrate everything we talk about, from detailed explanations and real-life stories to practical little prompts you can try right now, all woven into our conversation. By the end of our time together over these next sections, you will have a clear, step-by-step roadmap to turn your passive knowledge into confident, active speech. Let me introduce you to my friend, Elena. A few years ago, Elena, who is a talented designer from Italy, came to work in a London studio for a few months. Her English on paper was phenomenal. She had aced all her exams, read advanced design books in English, and could understand every single one of her colleagues during meetings. She would follow along, nod, and take notes. When it came to a complex topic, she could even understand the subtle nuances and jokes. But in those same meetings, if the manager looked at her and said, "Elena, what do you think of this design?" her mind would go completely blank. The words she wanted to say, the sophisticated technical terms she knew perfectly, vanished. She would often just say, "It's good," or "I like it," and then feel a wave of embarrassment wash over her. The problem was even more noticeable outside of work. She was eager to make friends, so she would join her colleagues for lunch or for an after-work drink. She'd listen intently to everyone's conversations, laughing when everyone else laughed and nodding at the right moments. But she felt invisible. She had stories to share, she had opinions, but every time she tried to enter the conversation, she'd second-guess herself. Is my accent too strong? Will they think my grammar is wrong? What if I say something stupid and they all look at me? She'd think. The fear of making a mistake was so powerful that it physically stopped her from speaking. I remember one evening at a pub, the conversation was lively and everyone was having a great time. At one point, a colleague was telling a story about a funny misunderstanding he had with his dog. Elena had a similar story she was just dying to tell. She had mentally rehearsed the whole thing, but as she opened her mouth to speak, another colleague started a new topic, and the moment was gone. She felt a knot in her stomach, a feeling of regret and frustration. She wasn't just a quiet person, she was a confident, funny, and warm person being held captive by her own fear. This is a very common feeling, isn't it? It's a tale as old as language learning itself. We're taught to be perfect in school. We learn grammar rules, memorize vocabulary lists, and practice writing until it's flawless. But speaking is different. It's messy. It's real time. There's no backspace button or time to think. And for many of us, this pressure to perform perfectly is what causes the freeze. Elena's problem, and likely yours too, was not a lack of knowledge, but a lack of practice under pressure. She had become a master of passive skills, listening and reading, but had not yet trained the active skills, speaking and thinking on the spot. So, for a moment, I want you to reflect on your own experiences. When was the last time you felt this way? Maybe it was in a Zoom meeting, or when you tried to order coffee, or perhaps when a friend introduced you to a new person. Take a moment to think about that specific situation. What exactly happened? What were you trying to say? What was the thought in your head that stopped you? Just acknowledge that feeling. Don't judge it. Just recognize that this fear, this mental block, is real, but it is not a permanent part of you. It's simply a habit you've developed, and habits can be changed. The key difference between what we call passive knowledge and active knowledge is something we need to understand before we can fix it. Think of your mind as a library. Your passive knowledge is like all the books on the shelves. You know they are there. You've probably read many of them, so you recognize the content and the vocabulary, and you can easily find the information when you need it for listening or reading. This is all the English you have heard and understood, the words, the phrases, the grammar rules that make perfect sense to you when you see or hear them. For Elena, her library was full of books on design, business, and daily life in London. When someone said, "We need to iterate on this design," she knew exactly what they meant because she had read that phrase countless times. She had the book on her shelf. But when she needed to say something herself, she couldn't find the right book and pull it off the shelf fast enough. This is where active knowledge comes in. Active knowledge isn't about knowing the books are there. It's about being able to pull them off the shelf instantly, open them to the right page, and read from them without hesitation. It's the ability to access and use your stored information in real time, under pressure. Speaking is an active skill, a performance, while listening and reading are receptive, passive skills. Your brain processes them in different ways. When you listen, your brain is a detective. It hears clues, words, intonation, context, and quickly puts them together to solve the mystery of the speaker's meaning. It's an incredible process, and for you to be at the B1 level means you're an expert detective. But when you speak, your brain has to do something much more challenging. It has to be a creator. It has to choose the right words, put them in the correct order, and form the sounds all at the same time and in a split second. This is an entirely different set of muscles, and if you've spent most of your time training the detective muscle, your creator muscle will feel weak and a little out of shape. This explains Elena's situation perfectly. When her manager said, "Elena, what do you think?" Her brain was so used to being a detective that it couldn't instantly switch to being a creator. It was trying to access a huge library of words and phrases, but without the practice of putting them into action, it just got stuck. All her knowledge was passive. She knew the vocabulary, she knew the grammar, but she hadn't trained her brain to use that knowledge on the spot. So, how do we start to build that active knowledge? We have to begin to train our creator muscle. And the good news is, you can start today with a very simple and powerful exercise that I want you to try. I call it the listen and repeat with a twist method. It goes beyond simple shadowing and moves towards creation. Here's how you do it. Find a short audio clip from a podcast, maybe even this one, or a short scene from a TV show, something that's about 15 to 30 seconds long. Listen to it once, just to understand the general meaning. Then, listen a second time, but this time, pause after each sentence or phrase. Repeat what the speaker said, imitating their intonation and rhythm as closely as possible. This is the first step, and it's a great way to warm up your mouth muscles and your voice. But here's the twist, the part that moves you from passive to active. After you repeat the sentence, I want you to try and rephrase it using your own words. Use a different verb, a different adjective, or a slightly different sentence structure. For example, if the speaker says, "I'm heading to the grocery store to pick up some food," you could rephrase it as, "I'm going to the supermarket to buy a few things." The meaning is the same, but you are actively taking the knowledge you just heard and transforming it into your own creation. It forces your brain to access the words from your library and put them together in a new way, all in a very low-pressure environment. It's a small, safe step toward becoming a creator instead of just a detective. This simple exercise is the beginning of the journey toward fluency. It won't fix everything overnight, but it is a consistent, powerful practice that will start to change the way your brain processes English. Now, let's tackle another huge, silent obstacle that holds so many of us back from speaking: the fear of making a mistake. It's a powerful, almost paralyzing feeling, and it's the quiet voice in your head that whispers, "Don't say anything. What if it's wrong?" This fear, this pursuit of perfection, is the second reason why your understanding is so far ahead of your speaking. Let's go back to our friend Elena for a moment. Do you remember when I told you how she'd open her mouth to speak in a meeting, but then stop herself? It wasn't just a memory lapse, it was a choice. A split-second decision driven by fear. She told me later that in those moments, she wasn't just thinking about the right words. She was thinking, will I sound stupid? What if my grammar is wrong? Everyone will notice my accent. This fear of judgment, this desire to sound perfect, was a far heavier burden than any tricky verb conjugation or complex vocabulary word. And this is not just Elena's story. It is the story of millions of learners around the world who are smart, capable, and knowledgeable, but who are held back by this invisible wall of perfectionism. I want to share another story with you, a slightly different one, about a student I once taught named Marcus. Marcus was an advanced learner, a truly brilliant guy. He was a scientist, and he would write scientific papers in English that were flawless. He could read the most complex academic texts with ease. But he was terrified of talking to his colleagues at the university cafe. So he would spend his lunch break alone, scrolling on his phone. I asked him about it once, and he told me, "I can't just talk. I need to know exactly what I'm going to say. I feel like I am acting, and if I make a mistake, my colleagues won't think I'm smart. The irony, of course, was that his colleagues already knew he was smart. His writing proved it. But Marcus was so focused on being perfect that he never gave himself a chance to be human. He was so busy trying to produce a masterpiece that he never even picked up the paintbrush. This is a mindset we have to challenge. We need to remember that making mistakes is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of effort. It is the most vital and necessary part of the learning process. Think about it like this. When you learned to walk, you fell down countless times. Every time you fell, your brain was collecting data. It was learning about balance, about muscle control, about gravity. You didn't stay on the floor out of embarrassment. You got up and you tried again. You made hundreds of mistakes, and because you did, you became a master of walking. The same is true for a language. Every time you say a word with the wrong pronunciation, every time you use a verb in the wrong tense, you are collecting data. You are learning what works and what doesn't. You are building muscle memory. The mistakes are the stepping stones to fluency. So, how do we start to overcome this fear? We have to begin with a small but powerful mental shift. I want you to try this with me now. Close your eyes for a moment. Think about that moment of fear again, that moment when you froze. Instead of seeing it as a potential failure, I want you to change the story in your mind. See it as a learning opportunity. When you think of a conversation you want to have, don't focus on the flawless sentences. Focus on the simple act of trying. Let go of the idea that you need to be perfect. Your goal in a conversation is not to pass a grammar test. Your goal is to communicate. It's to share an idea, a feeling, a thought, to build a connection. Most people, especially native speakers, are not listening for your mistakes. They are listening for your message. They are more than willing to meet you halfway. They will appreciate your effort far more than they will ever notice a small grammatical error. The next time you're in a situation where you feel that fear bubbling up inside you, I want you to whisper this to yourself. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to not be perfect. My goal is to communicate, not to perform. This is a small mantra, a mental reset that can help you push past that internal critic. It's the first step in giving yourself permission to be human, to be a learner, to be an active participant. It's time to put that new mindset into practice, and the best way to do that is to create what I like to call your own personal language lab. This is a space, often in your own home, where you can speak freely without any pressure from anyone else. It's the place where you can practice, stumble, and even get things wrong 1,000 times without a single person listening. Think about an athlete. Before they step onto the field to play in a big game, they spend countless hours practicing alone or with their coach. They run drills, they repeat the same movements over and over, and they make mistakes in practice so they don't make them in the game. You need to do the same thing for your speaking skills. Your language lab is your private practice field, and it's where you'll build the confidence and muscle memory you need for real-life conversations. The beauty of this is that it requires absolutely nothing but you and your voice. So, how do you set up your personal language lab? The first and most simple way is to start talking to yourself. I know, it sounds a little bit strange, but it's incredibly effective. You already have a running monologue in your head in your native language, right? You're always thinking about what to do next, what you're feeling, or what you saw on the news. I want you to start doing that same thing in English. You can start with a simple task. For example, when you're making coffee in the morning, narrate the process out loud. You can say something like, "First, I need to get the coffee mug. Now I am filling it with water. Then I will put it in the microwave for 2 minutes." It doesn't have to be perfect. The goal is just to hear your own voice speaking English and to get your mouth and your brain working together to form sentences. This is a low-stakes way to practice retrieving words and putting them in order. You can also use this time to describe the things around you. As you walk through your house, point to objects and name them. This is the table. The lamp is on the table. The window is big. Then, you can add more detail. The big brown table is in the living room. The small white lamp is on the table. This is not just about vocabulary recall. It's about building the habit of thinking in English and connecting objects and ideas with their English names and descriptions. It's a way of slowly, naturally, and comfortably switching your brain from being a detective to a creator. Another fantastic way to use your language lab is to practice describing your day. At the end of the day, before you go to sleep, take 5 minutes to talk to yourself about what you did. Today, I woke up at 7, I ate breakfast, then I went to work. I had a busy day. Again, don't worry about perfection. If you get stuck on a word, just describe it in another way. If you can't remember the word for frustrating, you can say, "My work was a little difficult today. It made me feel bad." The key here is not to be a walking dictionary. The key is to learn to be resourceful and to keep the flow of conversation going, even if it's just with yourself. This kind of practice is what gives you the confidence to speak more freely. You can also try using your language lab to role-play conversations. Imagine you're at a coffee shop and a barista asks you a question. What would you say? Imagine a friend asks you about your weekend plans. What would your response be? You can even have both parts of the conversation. Ask yourself the question, then answer it. This kind of practice simulates real-life conversations in a safe environment, and it helps you prepare for those moments when they actually happen. The most important thing about your personal language lab is that there is no judgment. There are no grades. The only goal is practice. The more you speak to yourself, the more you will get used to the sound of your own voice speaking English. You will begin to feel more comfortable, more confident, and less afraid of what might come out. Over time, these small moments of solo practice will give you the courage to take a small step forward and try these new speaking skills with another person. And that's exactly what we need to talk about next. I know that can sound intimidating. The idea of talking to someone, even another learner, can feel like a huge step. But it's a necessary one, and the key is to find the right person or people to practice with. Let me tell you about another learner I know, a kind and dedicated man named Kenji from Japan. Kenji had been doing all the right things. He listened to podcasts constantly, watched movies in English, and even started a small language lab, talking to himself while he cooked dinner. But when I asked him if he had a language partner, he would just shake his head. He was convinced his English wasn't good enough, and he was afraid of wasting a native speaker's time or feeling embarrassed in front of another learner. He believed he needed to be perfect before he could even begin to have a conversation. His passive skills were so strong that he could understand me perfectly, but his active skills were still trapped behind that wall of fear. One day, I encouraged him to try a language exchange app, just to see what would happen. I told him, "The people on these apps are just like you. They're trying to learn too. It's a supportive environment." Kenji was very hesitant, but he finally decided to give it a try. He found a young woman from Mexico named Anna who was learning Japanese. Their first conversation was short and a little awkward. They both spoke slowly and had to use a lot of simple words. But the magic was in the shared experience. They were both learners. They both made mistakes. When Kenji couldn't remember a word in English, Anna would help him. And when Anna couldn't remember a word in Japanese, Kenji was there to help her. They weren't teachers. They were partners. There was no judgment, only patience and understanding. Over time, their conversations became longer and more natural. They started talking about their hobbies, their jobs, and their families. Kenji wasn't just practicing speaking. He was building a genuine friendship. He realized that the goal wasn't to speak flawlessly, but to connect. He wasn't focused on grammar rules anymore. He was focused on hearing Anna's stories and sharing his own. This shift in focus changed everything for him. His confidence soared because he was getting positive feedback from a real person, not just his own voice in his kitchen. So, how can you find your own Anna? The world is full of opportunities to connect with people just like you. One of the best places to start is on language exchange apps and websites. Platforms like HelloTalk, Tandem, or even a community on Reddit can connect you with people from all over the world who are eager to practice. The great thing about these platforms is that you can often filter by language and even your level, so you can find someone who is a good fit. You can start with simple text messages, and when you feel ready, you can move on to a voice call. If online platforms aren't for you, think about your own community. Does your city have a language club or a meetup group? Many places have informal gatherings where people learning different languages come together to practice. This is a fantastic way to meet people face-to-face in a low-pressure environment. Another option is to see if any of your friends or colleagues are also trying to learn English. Practicing with a friend is one of the most comfortable ways to get started. When you find a potential partner, remember what made Kenji and Anna's relationship so successful. The best language partners are not teachers. They are friends. Look for someone who is patient, encouraging, and more interested in the conversation than in your grammar. You are not looking for someone to correct every mistake you make. You are looking for someone who will listen to your ideas, ask you questions, and help you keep the conversation flowing. Now that you know how to find someone to talk to, the next logical question is, okay, but what do I talk about? How do I keep the conversation going so it doesn't just end after 2 sentences? This is a very common concern, and it's what we're going to tackle today. We're going to move beyond just answering questions and learn some simple but powerful techniques to turn a simple exchange into a real, engaging conversation. Let's think back to Kenji and Anna. Their first conversations were probably a lot like a game of tennis, a simple question and a simple answer. What did you do today? I went to work. How was it? It was busy. But as they got more comfortable, their conversations started to flow. They were able to talk for much longer periods. They weren't just hitting the ball back and forth. They were building a real rally. They achieved this by using some key conversational techniques that we can all learn. The first and most important technique is to ask open-ended questions. Think of it this way. a closed question is like a locked door. It can only be opened with a yes or a no. Did you have a good day? The answer is yes, and the conversation stops. An open-ended question, on the other hand, is like an invitation. It opens the door and invites the other person to walk in and share more. Instead of, "Did you have a good day?" you can ask, "What was the best part of your day?" or "What was your day like today?" This encourages the other person to share a story, and that story gives you more information to work with. You could ask, "What are you passionate about?" instead of, "Do you have any hobbies?" These kinds of questions show genuine interest and are the key to a deeper connection. A second technique that will transform your conversations is something I call connect and share. When someone tells you something, don't just listen passively. Connect their experience to your own and share a little bit about yourself. For example, if your language partner says, "I spent the weekend hiking in the mountains," you can connect by saying, "Oh, I love hiking too. My favorite place to go is a forest near my house." Or, if you don't like hiking, you can still connect by sharing a related experience, like, "That sounds beautiful. I'm not a big hiker, but I love spending time outside. I prefer going to the beach," for example. This shows you were listening, and it keeps the conversation moving forward by providing a new topic or idea for the other person to respond to. It builds a bridge between you and the other person, creating a connection. It's the difference between being an interviewer and being a conversational partner. The third technique is about using filler phrases and sounds. We often think that pauses in a conversation are a bad thing, but they're not. Native speakers use them all the time. When you need a moment to think of the right word, you can use phrases like, "That's a good question," or "Let me think about that for a second." You can also use simple sounds like or well. These aren't signs that your English is bad. They are a natural part of a conversation. They show the other person that you are actively listening and thinking, and they buy you a few extra seconds to retrieve the words from your passive vocabulary library. These little phrases make you sound more human and more natural, and they are a great way to avoid that awkward silence that can happen when you're searching for the right word. Another tip is to ask for clarification. It's completely normal to not understand every single word, even for a native speaker. Instead of nodding and pretending you understood, it's much better to ask for clarification. You can say something as simple as, "Could you say that again, please?" Or, "What does that word mean?" Or, "Could you explain that a little more?" This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of a good conversationalist. It shows that you are engaged and genuinely interested in what the other person is saying, and it prevents misunderstandings. So, for our practice prompt today, I want you to try this. The next time you have a conversation, whether it's with a friend, a language partner, or even in your personal language lab, I want you to focus on just one of these techniques. Maybe you'll focus on asking an open-ended question, or maybe you'll try to use a filler phrase when you need a moment to think, or maybe you'll focus on connecting their story to your own. Just choose one and try to use it a few times in your conversation. It doesn't have to be perfect, but by focusing on one small technique, you'll be training your brain to think about conversation not as a test of grammar, but as a way to connect. Now, as you start to use these techniques, you'll inevitably run into another common and often frustrating challenge. That moment when you need a specific word, and it just won't come to you. You know the word is somewhere in your brain, tucked away in that passive library, but your active brain just can't find it in time. It's like a communication traffic jam. I want you to know that this feeling is completely normal, and it happens to everyone, even native speakers. We all have moments when a word is on the tip of our tongue. But for an English learner, this moment can feel especially stressful. You might feel a wave of panic, worry that the other person is getting bored, and the temptation to just give up and stop talking can be overwhelming. But don't give in to that feeling. There is a simple, effective, and completely natural way to manage these moments, and it all comes down to being resourceful, not perfect. I remember a time when I was speaking to a new friend who was learning my native language. We were having a really great conversation about different kinds of cooking, and she was trying to tell me about a certain kitchen tool. She was describing a long metal thing with holes in it that you use to drain pasta. She couldn't remember the word colander. Now, instead of just stopping and giving up, she did something beautiful and brilliant. She made a motion with her hands as if she were shaking water out of a bowl, and then she said, "You know, the thing you use for pasta to make the water go away?" I immediately knew what she meant. We both laughed, and I gave her the word colander. Our conversation didn't stop. It actually got better. That small human moment of her trying and me understanding created a stronger connection between us. She wasn't worried about sounding perfect. She was just committed to communicating her idea, and that made all the difference. So, when you find yourself in that situation, when you can't remember a specific word, I want you to remember her example. Don't panic. Just be resourceful. Here are a few things you can do, all of which you can practice in your personal language lab. The first and most powerful strategy is to describe the word using simpler language. You may not know the word for colander, but you can describe what it is and what it does. You can say, "It's a big bowl with holes in it." You put vegetables inside and the water goes out. Or, if you can't remember the word for subway, you can say, "It's the train that goes underground in the city." This not only helps the other person understand you, but it also trains your brain to use different parts of your vocabulary. It forces you to think creatively and to use the words you do know to express new ideas. A second strategy is to use gestures or pantomime. Your body language is a powerful communication tool. When my friend was talking about the colander, her hand gestures were just as important as her words. If you can't remember the word for to jump, you can jump a little. If you can't remember the word for tall, you can raise your hand high. Again, this isn't a sign of bad English. It's a sign that you are a determined and resourceful communicator. It's about using all the tools at your disposal to get your message across, and it often adds a bit of humor to the conversation, which is always a good thing. Finally, and this is a big one, you can simply ask for the word. There is absolutely no shame in saying, "I'm sorry, what is the word for the thing you use to drain pasta?" Or, "How do you say that in English?" This is a great way to learn a new word. The other person will be happy to help you, and by hearing the word in context, you are much more likely to remember it for next time. It's an opportunity, not a failure. Now, let's explore the music of the language as we continue to build your confidence and your communication skills. I'm talking about rhythm, stress, and intonation. This is the melody and beat of English. and mastering it is what truly takes you from being a person who can say the right words to a person who can speak naturally and be easily understood. You know, you can say a sentence with perfect grammar and vocabulary, but if you say it with a flat, monotone voice, it can sound unnatural or even a little robotic. This is a very common challenge, and it's something I see all the time. Many learners focus so much on getting the words right that they forget that how you say them matters just as much. The rhythm and melody of English are what give it life, emotion, and most importantly, meaning. Let me share a story about a friend of mine, a truly dedicated English learner named Marco. Marco could write emails and read articles in English with ease. His grammar was almost flawless, but he noticed that people sometimes had a hard time understanding him, even when he said the right words. I invited him to my house for dinner one night, and he said, "I am happy to be here." His voice was very flat, and he put almost equal stress on every word. He meant to express a friendly, happy sentiment, but the way he said it sounded a little stiff, like a simple statement of fact. A few minutes later, he was telling me about a new coffee shop he had found. He said, "I like the coffee." Again, a flat tone. I said, "You sound like you don't really like it." He was so surprised. "No, Sophia, I love it," he said, but he said it with the same flat tone. This is a classic example of the power of rhythm and intonation. English is a stress-timed language, which means we don't stress every word equally. We create a beat by stressing the most important words in a sentence: the nouns, the main verbs, the adjectives, and the adverbs. We say the less important words, the function words like a, the, is, and on, much more quickly. This creates a natural rise and fall, a rhythm. Without that rhythm, your speech can be difficult for a native speaker to follow, even if they understand all the words. So, how do we start to add this music to our English? We can start with a very simple and fun exercise. The next time you're listening to a podcast or watching a TV show, pay attention not just to the words, but to the rhythm of the speech. You can even tap your finger along to the beat of the stressed words, just like a drummer. For example, if a speaker says, "She went to the store to buy some milk," you'll notice that the words she, went, store, buy, and milk are stressed. The words to thee and some are said very quickly and quietly in between those beats. Listen for this pattern. It is everywhere in English. Another crucial part of the music is intonation, which is the rise and fall of your voice. Intonation is what helps you communicate emotion and intent. For example, a question almost always ends with your voice rising. "Are you coming?" Your voice goes up on coming. A statement, on the other hand, almost always ends with your voice falling. "I am coming." Your voice goes down on coming. Practicing this is essential, and you can do it on your own. Try saying the same phrase in 3 different ways. Take the phrase, "You're happy." Say it as a simple statement. Then, say it as a question. Finally, say it with surprise or excitement. Listen to how the melody of your voice changes each time. For your practice this week, I want you to try something new. When you're speaking, whether in your personal language lab or to a language partner, I want you to use your hands. Use your hands to visualize the rhythm and intonation of your voice. When you say a stressed word, make a little upward motion with your hand. When you ask a question, let your hand rise at the end. For a statement, let it fall. This physical action will help you feel the music of the language and will make you more aware of how you are speaking. This isn't about being perfect. It's about making your speech more natural and easier for others to understand. Now, let's dive even deeper into that music, into a phenomenon that is absolutely crucial for sounding natural and fluent. I'm talking about connected speech. This is the secret reason why native speakers often sound like they're speaking very fast and why words seem to run together. It's the way we link words to each other, and it's something that can feel very difficult for learners, but it's actually just a matter of practice. Think about it like this. When you write, you leave a space between each word. But when we speak, we don't. We connect the end of one word to the beginning of the next. This is what creates a smooth, flowing sound. Without connected speech, your sentences might sound a little bit choppy, almost like a robot saying each word separately. And while people will understand you, you'll still feel like you're not speaking naturally. I want to share a story about a student of mine, a fantastic young woman named Lee, who was a very talented English learner. She was so good at speaking, but she told me that she often felt like people had a hard time understanding her. One day, she was telling me about her weekend plans. She said, "I am going to go to the park for a walk." She said each word clearly and distinctly. The grammar was perfect, but the pause after each word made it sound a little formal and a bit disjointed. I explained to her that in natural conversational English, those words would have been linked together. It would have sounded more like, "I'm gonna go to the park for a walk." Or even more naturally, the "to go to" would sound like "wanna go to the," where the "want to" and "go to" just flow into one another. The "for a" would sound like "for a" instead of two separate words. This was a complete light bulb moment for her. She had been taught to pronounce every word perfectly and separately, but she had never been taught that fluent speakers often merge sounds together. We use contractions like "I'm" for "I am," or "there" for "they are." We shorten words like "going to" "gonna," and "want to" "wanna." But connected speech goes even further. We often link a final consonant sound to the starting vowel sound of the next word. For example, "what is it?" often sounds like "what is it." The T from "what" links to the "is," and the S from "is" links to the "it." This is a completely natural part of English, and once you start listening for it, you will hear it everywhere. So, how can you start practicing connected speech? You can use a very simple and effective technique with the materials you already have. Go back to that short audio clip we talked about in our previous sections. Listen to it again, but this time don't just listen for the words or the rhythm. Listen for how the words are connected. Try to identify where the speaker is linking a consonant to a vowel or where they're using a common reduction like "gonna" or "wanna." Then try to shadow the speaker, repeating the phrase immediately after you hear it, trying your best to copy how they link the words together. Let's try a quick example. Say this sentence out loud, word by word. "Don't you want to come over?" Now, say it again, trying to link the words together like a fluent speaker would. "Don't you" becomes "don't you." "Want to" becomes "wanna." So the whole phrase sounds like, "Don't you wanna come over?" You will notice that by linking the words, the phrase becomes much shorter, much more melodic, and much more natural. It's a small change that makes a huge difference. Don't worry about being perfect. The goal is just to start training your ear and your mouth to notice and produce these sounds. This is a powerful tool to not only help you speak more fluently, but also to improve your listening skills. Once you are aware of connected speech, you will start to hear it everywhere, and you will understand native speakers more easily. It's a key that unlocks a new level of understanding and speaking. All of these strategies, the language lab, the conversation techniques, the focus on music, are not magic tricks. They are tools. They are the same tools that every single fluent speaker has used to get to where they are today. But there is one final and most important ingredient that ties all of these tools together, and that is consistency. I want you to think about that feeling of frustration you had at the beginning of this journey, the one where you feel like you're not making progress. I want you to replace that feeling with a different one, the quiet satisfaction of knowing you're making progress every single day, even in small ways. Remember my friend Kenji? He didn't become a confident speaker overnight. He spoke to Anna for just a few minutes every day. He made small mistakes, learned from them, and kept going. He made small, consistent deposits into his speaking confidence account, and over time, that account grew and grew until it was full. Your journey to fluency is not a race. It is a marathon, and it is a marathon of small, consistent steps. You don't need to spend hours a day practicing. You can do just 5 minutes of talking to yourself while you make coffee. You can send a few text messages to a language partner. You can spend a few minutes listening and repeating a sentence from a podcast, focusing on the rhythm. Every single one of these small actions is a step forward. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Don't let fear or hesitation hold you back anymore. The knowledge is already inside you. The vocabulary is already there. The grammar is already there. Now it is time to give yourself permission to use it. Give yourself permission to make mistakes. Give yourself permission to not be perfect. The world is waiting to hear your voice, your stories, and your thoughts. The only thing standing in your way is your own fear. And you now have all the tools to overcome it. The more you speak, the easier and more natural it will become. Trust the process. Be patient with yourself. And most importantly, enjoy the journey. Keep practicing, and soon you'll find yourself speaking more effortlessly and understanding English with a deeper confidence than you ever thought possible. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. This has been the Best English Podcast, and I'm Sophia. Until next time, keep listening and keep speaking. You've got this.